she turned to me and she said, "Let me give you some advice." She said, "This institution was created with a particular set of values. It's about caring for patients, it's about innovation, it's about being responsive to the system. Don't screw that up."
The idea that an institute such as it is today just appears is nonsense. That it's the responsibility of one person is also nonsense.
I think that for the health professions in the next coming decades, one of the most important skills they can have is the capacity to continue learning.
If I can use my skill set in the lab to make a positive impact on someone else's life, or to just help further that journey and clarify some things for them while they're in a vulnerable state, then that's really the most fulfilling thing that you can do.
I was at Toronto General in the chemistry lab. When babies are born, some babies have a very high bilirubin, which is jaundice, yellow. And if it gets too high, the baby does need transfusion. The transfusion of newborns was done at Sick Kids. The birthing of mothers was done at Toronto General. And so our labs tested the babies first. When we did that, we stopped sending kids back and forth. When you looked at 1958, we suddenly became aware of DNA and what its structure was. We became aware of how cells worked. We were beginning to get automated equipment which opened doors which had never been opened for the healthcare system. And then finally, we were beginning to get computers. Now, if you put those all together, it was not a repetitive time, it was a growing time.
My name is Gertrude Pokley, and I'm a graduate of the first graduating class of the School for Medical Technology at the Toronto General Hospital. My mother was, I guess, reading a newspaper and came up with this ad that was advertising a new class of medical technology at the Toronto General, and I guess applied. We were the better trained than the technicians that were there. There was no such a thing as a technologist at that time. We were the first ones. You can teach anybody to do a test, but you have to go to school to find out what's behind the test, and that was very important for me.
When Diana Schatz was thinking about what would become the Michener Institute, it was the very early days of health professions education research. At that time, education was highly traditional. People sat in classrooms for many years, and somehow it was imagined that when they got onto the wards and into the clinics, they would be fully competent. Diana understood this was not true. Diana was a pioneer in many ways. I think, first of all, it needs to be said that most educators were men. So she was one of the very few powerful women educators and a voice and role model ever since for women leaders in healthcare education. She also was a laboratory professional. She was a medical biochemist. That professional group was not very well organized and didn't have a formal education training program. So in a second way, she was pioneering something that people really hadn't thought of yet. The third thing was she was very committed to clinical practice. She saw herself as someone working directly on patient care in a hospital, trying to make patients' lives better.
In particular, what I look at is the integration between basic science knowledge and clinical. So it's the knowing how and the knowing what. And what I can see throughout the history of the Michener is that from the beginning there was an understanding that these two things needed to be integrated, that you couldn't have clinical apprenticeship separate from your academic foundations, that there was a need to have these two pieces integrated in order to improve clinical performance. And so even though clearly my research wasn't around at that time, I can see kind of parallels and synergies between the way Michener was designed from the beginning and what we now know from decades of work in cognitive psychology and in health professions education to in fact be best practice.
By the time we'd finished working with Ministry of Health, three things had been achieved. One, they agreed that the product was essential to the healthcare system. Two, they agreed, which was a bit of a tussle, that it should not move into education. It should stay under health at that time. And they would fund it. And finally, Mount Sinai was generous enough to offer us the land, which we're sitting on, at a reasonable price.
I think today we look at the building, it's an amazing accomplishment, and perhaps it almost looks like it was easy. What is lost or forgotten, maybe, are the years between 1958 and 1972, when this building wasn't here. People tell stories of Diana's first curricula, and she would take them with her on the weekend and rewrite them, and they would be turned back in on Monday in a different form. She was constantly changing, looking for resources, recruiting faculty, and of course, finding places to work. When this building was finally produced in the 70s, it gave it some stability, but she didn't stop inventing.
But one of the things that I think Michener has always done really well is they're very nimble. And I think that comes from being a smaller organization. We can adapt and we can be that nimble when the Ministry of Health needs us to be. Chiropody program, that was a landmark program. The acupuncture program, which doesn't exist any longer, but was really state-of-the-art. We had a core semester that all students would take in every program, and that was truly interprofessional, well before its time.
What Diana's done for healthcare in general is just incredible, starting off with medical laboratory science, which I'm very grateful for because that's my field. But not only that, the principles which she built this school on are true for every single program. And you can find the same mindset and the same strong work ethic in any of the students. So when you're creating a legacy of healthcare practitioners they go above and beyond and they really care about the patient. And put a sort of holistic spin on healthcare in general. I don't know how you thank someone for starting that. I think it's incredible.